this call is now being recorded. So if you do end up speaking, just realize this will be posted on the AFWERX website after the fact. And so refrain from speaking if you don't want to be recorded on the video. When we're asking questions, use the Q&A function in Zoom. So if you play around with the dashboard a little bit, you'll see it on the bottom or on the top. Ask questions there. We're going to have someone who is at the end of this, this session where I just give some information. They will be reading the questions aloud, and then our team will do our best to answer them. And we'll also be writing the answers in the chat for our records, and so we have something we can share with folks afterward. This is scheduled for 2 hours. It will definitely not take that amount of time, at least based on our dry runs of this. So we'll go as long as we need to, up into 2 hours, and we'll finish early if there's no other questions. And I want to go around the horn really quickly to do some introductions. So first off, Captain Steve Lawver with Air Force Ventures and AFWERX here in DC. Any other members of Air Force Ventures on the line right now?
Steve, you have Captain Joey Aurora with Air Force Ventures.
Okay. On the AFWERX side.
Hello, everyone. Colonel Tina Parker, Public Affairs, Communication, and Marketing for AFWERX and AF Ventures.
Thanks, Tina.
And Mark Rowland with AFWERX Vegas also. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Mark. Thanks.
Hello, Steve. Lieutenant Colonel Jorge Manresa, Chief of Contracting for AFWERX Contracting Operations on the line.
Outstanding. And then let's see, SIBR Center of Excellence.
Hey, Steve, it's John McKenney from Contracting, AKA Pockets.
Okay, outstanding. Any others who have been able to join from any other organizations who are helping to work this effort?
Hey, this is Major Jessica Steinhoff. I'm Colonel Manresa's deputy, and I am here in case he has to jump off the call for something else.
Okay, anyone else? Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining today. Finally, my disclaimer is my 3-year-old may come downstairs. If that happens, I'll say something cheesy like, this is what we're fighting for, and I'll ask her to go back upstairs, but that probably will happen. Okay, the first thing that I'm going to talk through is the AFWERX website. So afwerx.af.mil. And you'll notice at the top there is, oh, the circle's a little bit off here, but there is yellow text that says COVID-19 response effort. So that is where we're going to keep live updates of any opportunities relating to the Air Force and our COVID-19 response. So I would bookmark the site and keep checking back there. And so here, this shows if you click that COVID-19 response effort, this is the page that it takes you to. Unite and Fight is the brand that we're promoting here. And it's trying to highlight the fact that we're fighting back. And the thing that we want to advertise is this is our concerted, response that we're making, as opposed to this is the crisis that is affecting the country, right? So Unite and Fight is the Air Force response, or rather it's the COVID-19 response powered by the Air Force right now. And then Tina, did you have anything related to the brand that you wanted to add on or about Unite and Fight?
Just to say to everyone, yes, we're leading this effort on behalf of OSD and some of the other key players for the acquisition side. But the Unite part is just really important for us because it is really bringing everyone's solutions, ideas, efforts to bear against this virus. So we don't want to brand the virus, we want to brand the effort. And the effort is all of you here on this call with us making this possible. So thank you.
That was much more eloquent than I put it. Thank you. Okay, so if you go to that website and you scroll down a little bit further, so we're on the COVID-19 Unite and Fight portion of the AFWERX site, you're going to see a couple lines, and then there's 2 links. Join the fight. One of them is the submission for government. It is a very simple form that says, like, what is your name? What organization do you work at? And then contemplating some of the ways in which you might be able to help. We have a team that is looking for volunteers on the Air Force side to be able to help with this very large back end of effort that needs to be done to be able to ingest all of these companies and people and universities that are coming to work with us. So the Air Force personnel absolutely do have a role to play here. That form on the left is how you can volunteer your time and effort if you're in the Air Force and frankly in the government. So it's not just Air Force, as Tina mentioned. And then on the right, you see the submission for non-government. I'm just looking through the participants list. I think a large portion of those on the call are going to be interested in this one. This links to a form that is what we call the RFI, or Request for Industry Information. This is really meant just to collect information on who is out there and how might they help, right? So it's not necessarily a solicitation for proposals for any type of specific award. This is really something that we put out almost immediately last week once this effort came to form, and we said, let's just see what is out there. And again, the response has been absolutely overwhelming. I'm going to avoid posting numbers or mentioning them, but we have been exceedingly surprised by the amount of support we've seen. We're going to talk through this a little bit, but on the back end, I just want to say that we have a pretty large team at this point, some of which are those government volunteers that I just talked about before this, and then some of which are at the leadership levels within the Air Force and the DoD, who are helping to ingest all of those applicants, all of those people who have something that they want to offer, and be able to route them to their actual customers, to the actual beneficiaries, who those individuals who are submitting these packages can be talking to. I'm going to talk through a little bit what is on that form here on the next slide, but I also, we want to talk about, there are a few broad focus areas that we are interested in. And you'll notice that number 7 at the bottom is other. So if you have something that you think is relevant to this Unite and Fight effort, and maybe it doesn't fall under welfare of citizens, readiness, combating the spread, logistics, industrial based impacts, or medical, then you still can definitely apply through this RFI and provide your information there, right? So I won't read, all the details of each one of these things. They are on the AFWERX website at the link that we talked about. Please do check them out. They are broad intentionally so that we're not giving ourselves too narrow of a funnel. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and there are solutions or services or ideas out there that can help in a really big way that we have not yet contemplated. So those are the broad focus areas. They do affect the way that we route information internally. Without going too much into the nuts and bolts, but it does help us to get you to the right place faster. So do your best when you're going through this RFI, filling out the form, to select which one of these 6, or frankly 7, that you're applying to. Okay, so I just talked about having this team on the back end helping to essentially comb through these responses and route them to the right place. So a huge thank you to that team. It's always growing. And then once you have applied through that RFI, don't keep following up with new things. Rather, just know that the team will get to your response, and they will reach out to you directly if they have any requests for clarifications, or if they're interested and there are some next steps, or if they say, hey, thank you so much, but there's nothing further at this time. So they will get back to you. Trust us on that. And we're tracking all the responses. Okay, and again, we're going to do questions at the end, but that was the RFI that is available via that link on the AFWERX website. Now I'm going to talk about another opportunity, which is the Small Business Innovative Research Direct to Phase 2. Now this is SBIR is a pot of money that every service has that must be used on small businesses doing innovative research each year. Now we have a regular cycle of this where every 4 months we will post a new one of these topics. And it just so happened that we had already been planning an out of cycle post for what is called a direct to phase 2. I don't intend on going into too much detail on this call, because the intent is not to make this a cyber call, but to make it a COVID-19 response Unite and Fight call. There will be other calls in the future that will be specific to SBIR direct to phase 2. But I will hit the high level here, and then I'll pass it over to John McCanny if he has anything else to add or correct me on after the fact. So the solicitation title and the topic number is AF20.R as in Romeo -DCS01, or Delta Charlie Sierra Oscar 1. And so 20.R just means that this is an out of cycle. So normally it's a .1, a .2, or a .3. And then DCS01, all that means is that it's a direct to phase 2, hence the D. And then CSO stands for Commercial Solutions Opening. It is the type of solicitation vehicle that we're using. And I'm getting a little bit too far in the weeds there, but bottom line, something is on the street right now for you to be able and go and apply for this. It is not only COVID-19 related, but we do have within that what is called a focus area that says, all those 6 things that you saw on a couple slides back. We're also interested in those as part of this open topic direct to phase 2. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the details there. First off, how to get there, how to find out the full instructions. There's 2 ways that you can do it. It's posted to the SBIR portal, which you'll see DSIP, DSIP in the top left corner. And then Jordan Feder, if you wouldn't mind posting these links in the chat as I go through them, just so people can navigate there. If you just search in your search engine of choice for SBIR portal, it's going to be the first hit for you. Otherwise, you can follow that link at the top. You'll notice once you get to that page in the top right, there's something that says topics. When you click that, you scroll down a little bit, and you're going to see a kind of dashboard on the bottom right for who has active topics right now. And one of them is Air Force, and you'll see the out of cycle direct to phase 2 CSO. That is what we're talking about right now. You can download that file as well as all attachments that are related to that. The other place that you can find this is on BetaSam. So BetaSam is the sam.gov. It allows you to explore all government opportunities, not just SBIR, but it is posted there as well. So if you go to that beta.sam.gov at the top, and then you change the search window to contract opportunities and search for x20.r, SBIR, it will bring up the same information. So 2 ways to get to the same information. And you'll see here after I've done that search, it is the first item that shows up. And if you scroll down, you've got again, the solicitation itself. And at the very bottom, you see in the large red circle, that is one of those attachments that says COVID-19 interest areas. And that goes into more detail, not just the high level that I showed you on the previous slide. It talks about for each of those, what is the Air Force paradigm? What are we, or sorry, the government paradigm, and what are we looking for specifically? And so please do check out that interest area document when you're going to apply to know what types of things we're looking for. Okay, so I think oh, here we go. So a quick look at this, again, not going in too much detail. It is up to a $1 million funding opportunity. And again, it's not only for COVID-19 related solutions. This is actually, it's open. So it's for any dual use solution. It's that solution which has both a commercial relevance. So there's some kind of commercial market and customer for it outside of the government, and some kind of Air Force need. Right? So there needs to be both there. The reality is that most technologies have some kind of analogous problem set in the government. So if you have a commercial solution or you're building a commercial solution, that if it is adapted or further research and development is done on that solution, it could be useful to the Air Force, then check out this topic. But we do have the focus area for COVID-19. Just a quick note here, it must be a US owned and controlled small business concern. So that means less than 500 employees, including any affiliates. I have a link, and then Jordan, if you wouldn't mind posting that link into the chat as well. But that gives the full definition of who is eligible for this program. I just gave you the high notes there. Okay, the solicitation itself is open at those 2 websites. It closes on April 30th at 12 p.m. Eastern time, so at noon. No late applications will be accepted, and I recommend starting early, because when everybody tries to apply at the same time, it bogs down the system. So get started as soon as you can if you are interested in this. I already talked about the attachment 1 of the solicitation that has the COVID-19 focus areas. Okay, so if right now you go in there and say, hey, I can solve one of these focus areas, what do you do? And the reality is that even if you're addressing a COVID-19 problem area, you still have the same requirements as everybody else when applying to this program, right? There's no special treatment given to those COVID-19 companies. So one of those requirements is what we call the customer memorandum. This is a document that we created a template for that captures the interest from an actual user somewhere in the Air Force or across the government. It captures those things like, I am this Air Force organization. I am interested in this small business to solve this problem for me. If this effort is funded, these are the things that we'll do together. And it gets as far as into granular detail of, we're gonna need these waivers, we're gonna need base access, and these are the individual deliverables that we're gonna work together to produce. And so that memorandum is still required even for COVID-19 focus area responses. So here's the answer to that, is you've got a little bit under 30 days until the close of solicitation. We created an email address, which is covid@afwerx.af.mil. And I mentioned that team that is on the back end who's combing through those responses to find your customers. They're also looking for SBIR applicants or prospective applicants and seeing if there's anyone within the Air Force or within the government who might be able to benefit from that COVID-19 response solution. So here's what you do. If your solution addresses one of those focus areas, and if you're an eligible small business, send an email to covid@afwerx.af.mil. And this is important. The subject line must have SBIR20.R dash your firm name. So the name of your small business. And again, that's SBIR20-R as in Romeo dash the name of your company. That's going to trigger some logic in our email that essentially gets you to the right team who's combing through looking for these types of solutions. So I'm sure there'll be questions on that, but I just wanted to highlight what you can do right now if you think you solve one of those focus areas. Okay, so there are a lot of other things that I cannot talk about quite yet because we want to make sure, speed is very important. Time is of the essence. But one of the things that's really important here that allows us to have that speed is to make sure that we are dotting all our I's, crossing all our T's, and that we are bulletproof in the way that we execute so that we can consistently get solutions to the warfighter, to the people, to keep our nation safe, to keep our economy strong. So I can't mention them quite yet, but I just want to say in general, there are other things coming down the pipe that will have a lot more accelerated timeline as compared to SBIR, which I just talked about. So you've got the RFI, which is already on the street. That is your first stop that will start routing you towards your potential customers and benefactors within the Air Force and the government. You've got this SBIR, which is live right now and closes on April 30th. That is another route. And then you've got these other things that will be hitting fairly soon. My recommendation is that you check back on the Thursday telecon because we might have an update then and have more things that we can share on that. At least that's our target to do so. So again, that's 1300 Eastern time or 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. We're going to do this again with any new information that we have and can share. You can register to attend via that link. And then Jordan, if you wouldn't mind posting the link as well. And also if you just go to the AFWERX website and go to that COVID-19 response team link at the top, you'll be able to scroll down and see that same registration link as well. The recording will be posted to the AFWERX site in the same location. Okay, so that is what I have for now. Again, this is going to be evolving. On Thursday, there will be more information. And I want to open it up for questions. As a reminder, type your questions into the Q&A pane, and then we're going to have folks who are reading them aloud to us so we can answer them. So I think we had Kyle, right? Were you the primary are you on the line to be able to read them aloud? And if not, we can have maybe either Joey or Jordan or Tina jump in.
Yeah, Steve, I'll read them for you. Do you mind giving Jordan panel access so she can type in the question or type in the answers as well?
Yep, you got it.
Okay. So our first question, can a small business apply for more than one direct to phase 2 SBIR at a time?
Great question. All right, Jordan, you are promoted to panelist. Let me know if you don't have the access you need. Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer is yes, you can apply to multiple. Now, this is something that it is based on the language in the solicitation for direct to phase 2 SBIR. You will notice when you go through that solicitation, nowhere is there a limitation that says you cannot apply if you already have an active phase 2, even if it's with the open topic. So this is something that's a little bit different from times past. So we have opened that up.
Great. Can it be assumed that attachments submitted to the RFI site will be kept confidential?
Yes, absolutely. So the site that we're using to collect that information is secure. We've also limited access to only the folks who need to see that on that OPT, that operational planning team who is trying to find solutions. So absolutely, that's a great question. And Joey, if you want, you can add in if there's any other details on that. No pressure to though.
I'm good at this time. Thanks.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I can add to that, Steve. This is Lieutenant Colonel Manresa. So yes, all vendor information that you submit through that RFI is an official channel to get to our contracting and our program management teams. So all that information you do, just please make sure you limit. Don't be putting proprietary things because we're not asking for proposals. We're just asking for your feedback in an RFI. So by all means, feel free to use that website, use that Google form. And also be assured that it is secured and only being viewed by government employees and federal employees of the United States Air Force. So hopefully that answers the question and gives a little bit more clarity to that concern.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so a company did submit to the RFI form. They're a little concerned that they have a horizontal technology that helps test any software and they will not be classified to any particular problem set. So can you give guidance on if someone's not sure which problem set to choose when they are submitting their RFI?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we do have the opportunity to select that option 7 other. And so if it can meet multiple, or if it's just outside of all those first 6, then feel free to mention that. I do want to say that even though the area of interest or the focus area that you select helps to route you to the right people, that doesn't mean that if you don't list the correct one, or you don't, if it's a little bit ambiguous where you should go, that you won't be seen by anybody. Every one of these responses will be reviewed. It might just take a little bit longer to get to the right place. And when I say a little bit longer, I don't mean on the order of months. I mean on the order of, okay, maybe that day they'll get to it a little bit later. And so anyway, just want to say it will be viewed by everybody. And these are humans on the other side. So they're looking at it holistically, not just in a very narrow lens.
Great. For logistics, security and protection, is this physical security or cybersecurity under the logistics tab or focus area?
So that's a really good question. Let me pull these up too while we're talking to him. Actually, if you can go on to the next one, I'm going to pull up the more detailed list and we can talk through that a little bit. Okay.
Great. Folks submitted an RFI but did not receive a response yet.
Yeah, so that is perfectly fine. This team has been genning up very rapidly. There are lots and lots and lots of responses that we're coming through right now. Don't be discouraged if you have not received a response yet, because the team will get to them.
And if a company did submit to a request that one of our folks have put out, Leif Erickson, to the SIBR folks, do they need to also resubmit through this RFI on the webpage?
So I think the one that Leif or Ryan Erickson sent out actually linked to the same RFI. What we're going to do is after this, if we can take a due out to go make sure that is the case. If that's not the case, then we will repost the correct RFI, or rather the most recent one. I do think they are the same, but we'll post that to be sure.
If a company, if our company can submit to more than one of the 6 focus areas, can they choose more than one at a time?
That's a good question. Let me actually bring up the form right now. So it's either a radio button or it is, okay, which of the following? So you can select one. And I think maybe one of the solutions here is we can add a form question that allows someone to apply to multiple. But for now, let's just say the decision has been made, so only one can be selected at the moment. So do your best to pick the one that is most applicable. And then I do see that later we have the opportunity to say keywords that describe the underlying technology. And then just, more broadly, you can discuss how you think your solution can impact the government. So there's a couple ways to get across what you can do and the full scope of what you can do, but you still need to pick just one for the moment.
So Steve, let me also add a little clarity on that. I just want to reiterate to everyone on the line that when you're responding to the RFI, you're providing the government feedback on what capabilities you might be able to provide to a coronavirus response. When we are looking and combing through these, we're looking to see what solution sets meet the requirements and the needs of the U.S. government in order to respond for our national welfare. This RFI is not intended to award a contract. So do not think that if we comb through that, we might be able to reach out to you to get more information and clarity. And then as we open other opportunities for proposals, you might just get notification, either everyone who's participated or people specifically, where we need to kind of get after those solutions a little bit quicker. But by no means is the RFI meant to be construed as a request for proposal or an RFP. Again, this is informational to allow us to be able to categorize what capabilities are out on the field from our small businesses, and then be able to direct those in kind to the right avenues once the federal government does open solicitations for those solutions. So I want to thank everybody for being interested and looking into that RFI. But again, we are not going to be awarding contracts off of this RFI, just to be clear.
Yep. Thank you, sir. That's perfect. So Tina, I can get back to the previous question about logistics if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay, so this is, again, it's pulling off of the list of interest areas that were posted along with the SBIR Direct to Phase 2. So feel free to check out either BetaSAM or the DSIP site that we talked about earlier to see this list yourself. But that logistics category is about adopting practices and platforms addressing emergent shortfalls in critical medical inventories. So you asked a great question. It does seem to be geared towards medical at the moment. And as these things have evolved, we will continue to update our lists at least when it, as it pertains to the AFWERX coronavirus website or any of our future comms. For now, it's looking mainly at medical. And I will say it also has the note of deploy common operational picture to provide shared supply and demand visibility for critical medical supplies. Then things like deploying AI to enable forecasting, matching timing, and supply types with vendor and delivery methods. So those types of solutions.
Okay, next question. I heard there was a maximum amount of SBIR funds on a per company basis. Is that correct? And if so, what is the limit?
So good question. That is not correct. Again, I'll point everyone to the solicitation itself, which if ever there's a limitation that relates to a specific SBIR solicitation, it will be in there, right? And so that one is not in there this time. There's no limit. If you've received, tens of millions of dollars in the past of other SBIR funding, it doesn't stop you from doing that now.
Okay. Is a SAMI number registration required? It is mentioned in the instruction, but it looks like SAMIs are not in effect yet. Will a DUNS number work for registration as long as we have a cage code?
So this one, I'm going to take a hack at it, John, and then if you wouldn't mind jumping in, I'm pretty sure or I had thought that SAMI would be in use. But yeah, John, what are your thoughts on this one? And we can follow up if we don't have the answer.
Sorry, can you just reread the exact context of the question?
Sure. They said, is a SAMI number registration required? It is mentioned in the instructions, but it looks like SAMIs are not yet in effect. Will a DUNS number work for registration as long as we have a cage code?
Yep, it absolutely will.
Awesome. John, this is why we need you. Thanks, Pockets.
Good deal. All right. It is said that there would be a call specifically for SBIR Direct to Phase 2. Will you send a notice of that to all of us?
Yep, I anticipate, or I think this one was probably sent before we started, but yes, we talked ad nauseum about the Direct to Phase 2 earlier on the call. That one is open now.
If you have a Direct to Phase 2 planned and Direct to Phase 2 is the appropriate vehicle for our COVID response as well, will the restriction on the total number of Phase 2s apply, or will that be waived for COVID contracts?
So again, that's a prior restriction and that has been lifted. So, there's no limitation about having an active Phase 2, even with Air Force Ventures via one of our other open topics, and then also applying for this Direct to Phase 2.
Okay. If a company has an AFWERX Phase 1 and are working toward a Phase 2 award, if they get their standard Phase 2 award, can they also propose under this Direct to Phase 2?
Yep. So that's a good question. And that is another one where in the solicitation, you'll notice that there are no lines that say, if you are in J20.1 CSO1 and apply for Phase 2, that you cannot apply for the Direct to Phase 2. So it does not mention that. And therefore you are able to do that. So yes, even if you're in J20.1, you may apply for the AF20.R DCSO1 Direct to Phase 2. Now, one caveat, you'll see a definition in the solicitation for what is called essentially equivalent work. And so this probably goes without saying for many, but those who are new to the government, maybe not. You cannot apply and win multiple contracts or multiple agreements or multiple awards for the same thing. And essentially that would be deemed as fraud of trying to get paid twice for the same effort. So just realize that if you are going to apply, make sure it is with a sufficiently different solution, i.e. it is not essentially equivalent work.
Okay, and for this proposal, it closes at the end of April for the Direct to Phase 2. Will awards be considered earlier for urgently needed capabilities?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the answer is no in this case. And that is where I'm going to point you to join the call again next Thursday. Because I mentioned there's other vehicles that are actually more intended to very rapid awards. And what I'll say is when you think about SBIR, that to me is the value proposition that is unique to SBIR, especially for Air Force Ventures, is a combination of speed and volume. So it is relatively fast, but is not extremely fast. But we can do many hundred awards at the same time, right? So it's a little bit of a balance there, but just realize that it might not be the optimum tool for the fastest award. And then the last point on that is there is no issue with you applying for multiple solicitations with the same solution. One, you have to say that you're doing that, right? So when you apply, say, oh, by the way, I also applied to this other thing. And two, you actually can't be awarded both of them. So at some point, if you're selected for both, you have to choose which one you're going to take. And so anyway, I would consider applying for anything and everything that relates to your solution if it fits.
Hey, Steve, this is John. I just want to jump in and mention one thing on that front. And you pretty much hit the nail on the head already, but I want to make sure everybody on the line is aware that the D2P2 SBIR solicitation is not the only tool that is out there specifically for COVID. We've had a lot of questions come in, and is this how the government is soliciting all the responses? SBIR is just one piece of the overall big solution. So just everybody, I just want you to recognize that it's just one little piece of the puzzle. SBIR may not be the best path for your company. It's just something to look at. So I just wanted to point that out.
Spot on. Thanks, John.
If we recently won an Air Force SBIR Phase 1 under 20.1, do you recommend we also submit our solution for this solicitation?
So I won't make a recommendation as to whether you should or should not, but I'll say you are able to if you elect to do so, right? And so again, the caveat there is if you're selected for both, you can't be awarded both, then you'll have to make a choice there. And again, you have to announce that you're planning to do so, or that you are doing so when you apply.
And is this, we might have answered this one already, but is this treated like an open topic where open topic companies can have one Phase 2 at a time, meaning that if we have a current Phase 2, we cannot participate in this effort? I think you answered that, but can we do it again just in case?
Yeah, of course. So it is treated like an open topic. It is an open topic, but there is not that limitation that you can only have one active open topic Phase 2 at a time. So you can have multiple now.
So we do another question about the rolling manner of responses given the urgency, but you already did answer that for the SBIR itself, the directive Phase 2, when it closes April 30th, that's when you all will review all the submissions, correct?
Yep, and we're going to do our best to move very quickly on those reviews. I can't make any promises on the award timeline yet. Just know that we care very much about being timely and also being able to handle the scale of the number of awards we plan to make.
And can they get access to these slides after this presentation?
Yeah, so Tina, if you're okay with that, maybe what we could do is post it to the AFWERX website.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the next question is, what is that website address? So it is afwerx.af.mil/coronavirus. If you go to afwerx.af.mil, up at the very top, as Steve showed on the first slide, click the yellow COVID response effort, and it will take you to the one-stop shop for all the information you're going to need. And we are updating that as quickly as we can, so keep checking back. Next question. Are companies that have already received rapid matching funds eligible for further matching? If they are eligible, is there a combined cap across all previously awarded SBIRs on how much matching funds the Air Force will apply?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's kind of a two-part question. The first is if you are already on a Phase 2 for which you've had matching funds, can you have additional SBIR funds that are applied? Really a three-part question. So can you have additional SBIR funds that are applied? The answer is that per statute and the policy directive, yes. But then there's also how we implement that for Air Force Ventures as a whole, and we're developing that strategy. So our intent is to have opportunities for that, but I would say we don't have any specifics on that right now. And as we can get to that, especially with all this, the COVID-19 response going on, we'll get to it as soon as we can. No promises on this week or next. We're going to try our best. The second piece is, can you add additional customer funding? So i.e. the matching that's not coming from SBIR, it's coming from someone in the Air Force or the DoD or else somewhere else in the government. The answer to that is yes, but the preferred route is for them to do a Phase 3 with you directly, right? And so we won't go into the details of Phase 3, but it's essentially what comes after the Phase 2. And the intent with Phase 3 is now you've built out a solution and you want to start selling that to that customer who's out in the Air Force or in the government elsewhere, right? So that's the preferred route. Though we do have a mechanism to add that customer funding to the active Phase 2 if that customer does not have the contracting resources to do the Phase 3 themselves. So it's kind of an exception type of basis. And then the third piece of that is there's some universal cap against what is the amount you can put on a single Phase 2. And the answer to that is there are waiver ceilings that if we want to go above that amount, we have then to go and ask the SBA, the Small Business Administration, for a waiver. And so that is, I think, John, correct me, I think it's 1.675 or on or about million from SBIR. So that doesn't include the government matching that's included on a Phase 2. And real quick, John, is that correct for the number?
Yeah, yes, that is correct. But what I would like to state very clearly is please read your solicitation, because your solicitation will define any face value thresholds or ceilings which you cannot exceed. And in regards to the waivers, those are very, very, very few and very far between. So I don't want anybody on this call to think in any case that just because you feel like you have a solution that should go above that waiver, you will get it. You need to abide by what that solicitation says.
Yeah, and so as John said, he's offering waivers to everybody. So thanks, buddy. So I also want to clarify, the things that you said, John, kind of jog my memory on this, is when I say that, what I'm saying is, once you've been awarded your phase 2, what is the absolute cap that you can add any additional funding to? There's the waiver for that, which we mentioned, which very unlikely to go over, but there are rare exceptions. But when you're applying to the direct to phase 2 itself, do not apply with more than what is in the solicitation. Regardless of what the waiver is, we set a cap, and that's $1 million from SBIR for the direct to phase 2. If you apply with above that, then, check out the solicitation, but I think that is that's a disqualifying.
It's absolutely, it's grounds for removal immediately. There's no, even if you have a fantastic technical solution, if you submit a proposal that is not in accordance with the solicitation requirements, you will be removed out of evaluation and there's no further consideration.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
All right. If a company submitting to the RFI has more than one solution, should they submit separate forms or should they try to put it all on one form?
Ooh, that's a great question. I actually would defer if either Jorge or anyone else on the PK side would like to jump in. I have my thoughts.
On the RFI, just because the way the Google form is set up and what we're trying to do is create categories. It's probably a lot easier for us to tease out your solutions if you have multiple that fit multiple categories. I would say do an RFI for each of the specific categories. If you start lumping up 10 different solutions under one, it's going to make it really hard for us to be able to gather the data and put the data analytics behind that to figure out how we're going to move those across our enterprise that's going to be buying for the whole DoD and the rest of the federal government. So yeah, if we could just keep the RFIs to the individual areas, I think that would help our data collection capabilities a lot better. Hopefully that answers that question.
Super helpful. Thanks.
For the RFI, does an organization for the RFI need to be an operational organization, or are research organizations also acceptable?
Yeah, those are also acceptable. I mean, it's extremely broad. And remember, this isn't a solicitation for proposals. Again, it's just us requesting for feedback. And so it's meant to be incredibly broad. Am I off base there, Colonel Raisa?
No, you're absolutely right. The RFI is our attempt to get everything from anywhere in the ecosystem. So be it research, nonprofit, small business, or large business, the RFI is our repository in which to collect that information. So you're not having to deal with single, email points across the government. This is one way that we can collect and inform our leadership as to what the capabilities are from the community at large.
Great. And what are some of the requirements for the RFI? Do we need to prepare or keep anything ready?
No, I mean, I can talk through just very high level what the questions are right now. There's very minimal requirements. So, things like who's a good point of contact at your organization, the name of your organization. We ask you to say, what is the type? So are you just an individual citizen or a small business or a large business? Are you an investor? So there's a big list of items there. You have to select one. And then it's an open-ended question of, in one sentence, describe how you can help. Right? And so that's very open. And then we have another section that's, if you would like to provide more detail, up to one paragraph, then you can do that. We ask you to pick one of those focus areas like we talked about. We do have a section that is optional that just says, hey, does your solution fit into one of these other subcategories? If you don't fill that out, there's no issues. If you do fill that out, it doesn't give you any benefit over anyone else. It's just helping to route to specific sub-teams we have within our overall team. That's available to you. And we also have this question that is, in what time frame can your solution have an impact? So, it goes all the way from the virus ramp up. So, how are we trying to mitigate the impact as it spreads, to things like social distancing? So how are we working from home and not going out and finding ways to do the daily things that we need to while distancing? Returning to normal. So as we transition back to life and work, is that when your solution would be ready to implement? And obviously the new normal. So how do we become more resilient against future outbreaks. So this is kind of a timeline differentiated question, just that you have to make a gut call on which one you fit. We ask for keywords, up to 3, that describe your technology or solution. And then, a website. So if you have a website that's live, we allow you to input the URL. And then for attachments, that is actually via email. So the very last question on the form will tell you the specific instructions for how to provide those attachments. There are no limitations on them, except that they have to be PDFs and they have to be less than 5 megabytes total. Aside from that, it can be promotional, it can be concise. In general, I would say that if you're sending us a 200-page abstract that's deeply technical, it's much harder for our team to pull value from that. So be concise, be clear as you can, and try to make an impact through the visuals in your words in those attachments.
Is the new out-of-cycle direct to phase 2 joint or only Air Force?
It is Air Force. So it's not like the joint 20.1 phase 1. And I would anticipate that direct to phase 2s are going to continue to be an Air Force type of thing. And only because as you have the joint phase 1, they can feed into phase 2s with multiple services. And so it branches out eventually anyway. That said, we don't quite have resolution on how we're going to treat these non-Air Force stakeholders with the SBIR, with the direct to phase 2, because especially with COVID-19, it is a very joint response that is being had, as Tina mentioned. So check back next Thursday for any updates on that. We'll take that as a do out for how exactly are we going to treat non-Air Force stakeholders. I will say in the past, the way that we've done this is say, look, you need that customer memorandum, the one that I talked about that captures the interest of your Air Force partner. You need at least one from the Air Force, but you can have them from a number of other parties as well. There's no issue with that, as long as there was only one in the Air Force. And so the thing that we owe you is, does there need to be at least one from the Air Force? My answer today is yes, and then we'll follow up next week.
Okay. And folks that want to attend these AMA calls, do they have to register every time?
So I think the answer to that is yes.
I believe it is.
Yeah, so yes. The same link that is on the AFWERX.mil/coronavirus will work for registering for the next one.
Okay. So once an idea is submitted, how long will it take for a response back from you? And what is the timeline between submission and evaluation of an idea or potential engagement?
Yeah, great question. So first off, I want to foot stomp that it's not an evaluation. Again, it's just you're sending information or feedback to the government, and they may or may not reach out with requests for more info or next steps. So it's not an evaluation. In terms of timeline, we can't say yet. And again, that's because we are at the same time building out our back-end capability to route these solutions or these ideas to the right place. And we are getting more and more and more RFI submissions in. And so we just don't know yet. That's something that we will track, and I'll see if we can get you, on these calls, perhaps we can have rolling averages for response time, but for now we don't have that information.
And the question was a little ambiguous, so I inferred that it was for RFI. If that is for D2P2, can you give the timelines again for the direct to phase 2?
Fantastic question. Okay, so it's open now. So again, this is for direct phase 2. It closes on April 30th at 12 Eastern time, so noon. And then in terms of notification, we target for what we say in the solicitation is within 60 days to award for any phase 2 awards. And that's a target, right? So it's not, holding us to it necessarily. Now, what I want to say is our intent is to do things faster than that. And 60 days is kind of the tail end of the expectation. So I would say in general, the expectation should be about 2 to 3 weeks after the close of applications to hear something, right? So it won't necessarily be that you're being put on contract if you're selected, but you will at least have a notification that you have been selected, you've not been selected, or you're technically selectable, but we've decided not to fund you at this time. Those types of things. Expect within 3 weeks of the close to hear something, or at least a notification that says, hey, we haven't decided yet, more time will be needed.
Are you asking for proposals or white papers? Again, it doesn't define whether that's for RFI or D2P2.
Great question. So for the RFI, there is no need for a proposal or a white paper per se. You can have attachments, but that is not a proposal. It's just providing feedback and information, as the name implies, to the government. For the SBIR direct to phase 2, those are proposals. And you'll notice in the solicitation instructions, there are, we tell you what things we're asking for, and that includes things like a 15-slide pitch deck, 15-page technical volume, which is kind of like the white paper, right? 100-second video, and that customer memorandum as an example. So go through the solicitation to have the actual instructions on what you need, but that is a proposal.
And what if we are a private company with a pro bono solution for COVID-19, also looking to partner with scientific partners as a nonprofit effort?
That's great. I would highlight that in the RFI, as we talked about. I mean, you have the opportunity to say what type of organization you are. So if you're nonprofit, you can list that. If you're an individual citizen or something, or unaffiliated, you can say that. You've got the one sentence push line of this is the thing that we can provide or do with you. And then you've got the one paragraph description. So anyway, just try as best you can to capture that.
And for the RFI, are there restrictions that companies must be a US owned company?
No. Nope. So that's a really good question. The RFI is, again, it's completely open. And then when we talk SBIR direct to phase 2, yes, there are limitations there where it's less than 500 employees, including affiliates, and then it's US owned and controlled.
If an organization already has a phase 1 SBIR award, are they eligible for the direct to phase 2 out of cycle?
Yes.
Okay, so for future calls, and we did answer this, do we need to register online for each one? The answer was yes. The other question subsequent to that is, won't that create multiple RFI numbers per company? So I think there might be some confusion on registering for this call versus the submitting to the RFI. Yeah,
so when registering on the call, that's not giving you an RFI number, but when you submit to the RFI, you do receive a number per submission, and that's fine, right? So the reality is we don't need to tie each RFI number to a single company or entity. You could have 5 different RFI numbers assigned for different solutions. That's fine.
What if we have an existing 19.3 SBIR phase submitted already? How do we expand or open the aperture?
So can you read the first? Was it a 19.2 company?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question is exactly. What if we have an existing 19.3 SBIR phase, doesn't say 1 or 2, submitted already? How do we expand or open the aperture?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. It is kind of specific, but it's worth talking about. So there are 19.2, 19.3, and then 19.3 direct to phase 2 companies who have either submitted their proposals and are awaiting the results, or they've been notified that they're technically selectable and we intend to fund them, but they have not received their award yet. So the first part of that answer is we cannot change your submission at this point. So if, after COVID-19 occurred, you said, hey, I think I can fulfill a different role if I switch the things that I'm proposing, you can't change that now. You would have to do a separate proposal. And that's somewhere where, maybe you apply for a direct to phase 2 via this 20.R cycle that we talked about with that different solution. That would be fine. But for those who are waiting, just know that we care very deeply about awarding these things. We have not forgotten about you. And it's a constant topic of conversation about how to efficiently give out those awards, because we know that, the entire economy, not just those affected directly by the virus, are being affected here.
If you currently have a solution in market for population health, health risks, etc., and found an opportunity to leverage a new COVID-19 solution, would that be helpful?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Yeah, if you currently have a solution in market for population health, health risks, etc., and found an opportunity to leverage a new COVID-19 solution, would that help?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. If we see this happening quite a bit, where you'll have companies who do one thing and realize that they can do another thing and to help the fight, whether it's supply chain or actually getting solutions out in the field. So absolutely. Again, I would not constrain your mind whatsoever on what is in the realm of the possible and what things we're looking for when you are applying to that RFI, or when you're providing information via that RFI. Now, when it comes to the SBIR direct phase 2 solicitation, yeah, you'll notice in there that we are specifically targeting those non-defense commercial solutions that can be adapted for some kind of Air Force need. And so if there's already a solution that's out there that, if adapted, would meet another need relating to this, you absolutely can do that.
Okay. And Jordan, in the chat, can you put the direct to phase 2 solicitation link up again, please? Okay, and then, so the RFI versus the direct to phase 2, can you very briefly go over again what the differences are?
Yeah, sure. So the RFI and the direct phase 2 are both live now. and you can, so the RFI is a request for industry information. That is really just us going out to everybody, whether you're large business, small business, university, nonprofit, individuals with great ideas, like anybody, and saying, how can you potentially help us in this effort, right, relating to COVID-19? And so that is very open-ended. It is not a call for proposals, so we won't be selecting and awarding based on that, but we will be connecting you in some cases to those who are interested in those solutions, right? And so that can lead to conversations, which can lead to deal flow, right? Or maybe it just leads to good ideas that allow action to take place, right? So that is the RFI, very low barrier to entry in doing that. That's the thing that we have the team on the back end who is trying to find whether or not those solutions are actually useful to us in this fight. The direct to phase 2 solicitation, that is calling for proposals. There is money attached to that. And there's a solicitation that defines what exactly we're looking for. What are the rules around that? So again, that's the up to $1 million that you can be awarded as part of that. So one is just a request for information. One is an actual solicitation that is trying to get proposals through which, and as a result of which, we will make awards.
What if your small business does not currently have a DoD contract, but your subcontractors do? Can we piggyback on their credentials?
Yeah, so credentials is an interesting one, right? It really depends. I think when you say credentials, that could mean something like Cage Code, Dunce numbers, SAMI, and the answer to that would be no. You'll need to register and have your own. You could be talking about clearances, facility clearance, that sort of thing. For that, it kind of depends on the type of vehicle. So I can't answer that one fully, but I'll say in general, follow the instructions in the solicitation. Right? The RFI is very open, and if we need something different, that's an easy one just to start a conversation. But for the SBIR, just make sure you're following the instructions clearly on that.
And are there any funding requirements? Does your company need to have a specific amount of revenue, existing VC funding, partnerships, accelerators, etc.?
So if the question is for RFI, the answer is no. If the question is for SBIR, SBIR, direct to phase 2, the answer is also no. But what I would point you towards is the Section 6 evaluation criteria, which talks about exactly what things we're looking for and how we assess your proposal. And so you'll notice some discussion of commercial traction and things like that in there, or rather commercial potential is the wording that we use. So just take a look at that. But no, there's not a specific benchmark that we have for amount of funding or the number or prestige of the programs that you've gone through.
Okay. We have a comment from a company. They are manufacturing face shields for medical staff in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They need more laser cutters and possibly 3D printers to spread out the service. Is there funding available for that? They have several volunteers on their staff and using their personal laser cutters, but they're overtasked and unreliable. Can we help?
Yeah, so I mean, philosophically, I would say that, yeah, this fits into logistics and probably actually a number of other focus areas that we have. Just read through the list and then apply to whichever one makes the most sense. And in terms of if there's money, this is, again, we can't talk about the numbers exactly we have for these efforts right now, but just look up to the federal government, which just is approved a $2 trillion package, and some percentage of which will be put towards these types of solutions. So we can't release the numbers now. Just know that a lot of people are interested in solving these problems, and especially if you can help with anything related to medical, the supply chain, things like that, that would be relevant. The kind of second piece there is you have a solution, but if you had X, Y, or Z more, or if you teamed with other organizations, you would be able to make even more of an impact. I would just discuss that in the RFI and say, oh, by the way, if there's someone providing this other thing that paired with my solution makes it 10x better, yeah, mention that. There's a chance we could just make the connection.
Okay, for the direct phase 2, I understand the importance of an MOU. Would you please describe the best way to identify the right people within the U.S. Air Force to connect to put our business in a position to possibly receive an MOU?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's no silver bullet with we call them customer memorandums. And so MOUs, it's still floating around a little bit, but typically an MOU means there's money tied to it. And a memorandum of agreement means there's not money tied to it. So I'm just calling it for now customer memorandum. But there's no silver bullet in terms of the best approach for that. And so one answer that I would give there is maybe, I don't know if I go into too much detail about how exactly people have achieved this. I'll give you a couple of things that have worked for people in the past. So hiring a veteran who understands and has relationships, going through the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, who is a big collection of government personnel who are always talking to each other. Filling out the RFI, right, is another one of those things where there's actually a team that's trying to route you to your customers. And we've seen people even just going on, doing search engines, like searching for Air Force, and then whatever capability they're trying to provide, and trying to identify who is or what is that organization that's responsible for that product or service. Going on to LinkedIn and then trying to find people at that organization. So there's so many different ways to do this. In general, the thing I want to say right now is do not pester people. And so if they either don't respond or if they tell you to stop reaching out to them, don't keep doing it, because that will close the doors on you, and that will also close their minds to being able to participate with us on this process. We've seen it burn a couple of people before. So get creative, do any number of those things that I talked about, or things that even I didn't mention. Just try whatever you can. And also the 20.2 cycle, which is not this current open one, but will open, I think close of applications is going to be in early July. Phase 1 is more intended towards being able to build out that R&D plan and find that customer. And so you're given 3 months in phase 1 and a smaller amount of money, essentially for you to find those customers and build out a good plan with them on what you're going to execute. And so we have a team that is providing curriculum and training during those 3 months on how to do that most effectively. So phase 1 might be most best suited to you if that's the case.
Okay. And the gentleman who submitted the 3D printer question, please check your chat. You have a connection already in your chat waiting for you. Nice. To help you out. Okay. So do we have a link to replay yesterday's webinar, COVID-19 Response Advanced Manufacturing Partners Call? I'm not tracking that. Are any of our folks on here tracking that call? It was Advanced Manufacturing Partners Call.
So I'm not aware of it, I think. I didn't participate in that one. We can take that as a due out to try to find out if it was publicly releasable.
Yep, we will get back to you on that one. Okay, if I submitted an RFI, can I redo it and update my answers?
Yeah, good question. So, that's tough. I think to be able to do that, you would have had to save the link after you completed it. And then just paste that in the URL and go back and do it. In general, I wouldn't suggest doing that because that might throw off all that team that we have pouring through it, because it'll update the actual cells and they might not see the previous, whatever was there before, or they might have already done it and then they just wouldn't go back and see it again. So I would just recommend doing it again. No issue there. And then just identify like, hey, by the way, I provided a previous response and it was RFI number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And are you looking for large company involvement?
Absolutely.
What are the steps between a selection of an idea to a potential award? I'm going to say that's got to do with D2P2 because RFI, again, is not reward. We're just soliciting information.
Yeah, I mean, really good question. At a high level, the solicitation closes. We have an evaluation team that does our peer review and makes the selections. We make a recommendation to the contract team who would ultimately be making the awards. There's contract negotiations and screenings that still occur because people can drop out even at the last minute, even if they're technical selects due to a number of disqualifying reasons. And then the awards are typically done in a sprint via this Air Force Ventures process. So we try to concentrate a large number of awards into a short time frame. But that's the high level what happens.
Okay, since you have executive agency on Defense Innovation Board support for the DoD, will you look at potential customers across the service rather than just Air Force?
Absolutely. So I do want to say to that operational planning team that is combing through the RFI responses, that is joint in nature. There are multiple agencies and services participating in that.
Mm-hmm. And then the question, can we submit the COVID RFI form multiple times? I think we already said yes on that. You can. Yep, if you have multiple solutions. I have a pending phase 2 Air Force STTR proposal for a topic that was part of the normal STTR cycle. Oh, I can't see it. There it is. I believe will help fight COVID-19 and future outbreaks. Is there a way to route this to the appropriate people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is kind of like the question we got earlier about if you had a pending phase 2 award for 19.2 or 19.3. Can you change anything now about that? So the answer is no, you can't change what you propose. So if you're already waiting for your STTR award. But the second piece is there's no issue with making the evaluation or the contracting team aware of the relevance to COVID-19. It won't change the evaluation criteria that gets you to a select or a non-select. But once you have been selected, if that is the case, then they might be able to award a little bit faster. So no promises on that. You'll notice in the solicitation, there should be someone listed as either the contract officer or the technical POC. Feel free to reach out to them on that. Part 2 of this is when you apply to the RFI, what I would do is just identify, in that paragraph description that, oh, by the way, I applied to STTR, and just provide some high-level details on that.
Yes, Steve, this is John. So from a contracting perspective, and again, you touched on this earlier, so, really important point. For any companies that are contemplating resubmitting a solution that they've already submitted, you absolutely need to identify that in whether it's in an RFI or a full-out proposal. You need to make everyone aware that, hey, I have submitted this solution before. Here's, the solicitation I submitted it under. Here's the status of it, whether was a non-select, in process, award. You absolutely need to make the team aware of that.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
If we are submitting a new capability, I assume through the RFI, but as a retired Air Force leader, we see how this capability fills an Air Force or DoD need. Should we seek an Air Force sponsor to help the project get funded?
I mean, yeah, so I would never try to limit your access to capital or customers, right? So I would say applying to the RFI does not preclude you going through other channels. In fact, I would encourage it if it fits for you. And then the second piece is regarding SBIR direct to phase 2. Yeah, again, we're expecting you to be able to find your customer via a number of different means, and having connections internally is not, that's fine.
Are COVID response vendors required to have end users sign memorandums?
No. So for the RFI, the answer is no to that.
And it doesn't say specifically, but if it's direct to phase 2 and they do not currently have an end user, but they do have a COVID-19 proposal, what do you recommend?
Actually, yeah, I'm really glad you clarified that. So I'm going to go cycling the presentation a little bit. Okay, so that last line here, I'm really glad that you bring this up. So specifically speaking of the direct to phase 2 SBIR, you still need a customer memorandum, even if you're applying to solve one of the COVID-19 focus areas. So I can't stress that enough. I would hate for you to apply without having that customer memorandum, only to be rejected if you have a good solution, right? And so what we have offered up in the meantime, again, you've got a little under 30 days until the window closes, is send an email to covid@afwerx.af.mil, and then include in the subject line SBIR space 20.r, and then dash your firm's name. And what that's going to do is it's going to trigger that team on the back end to try to find if there is a customer out there for that solution. So anyway, that is a way that you might get paired with a customer that might result in a customer memorandum. You still require one for direct to phase 2.
An emerging small business had applied to the SBIR 20.1 and were advised that they had received notification if accepted or denied. They have not heard anything. Are we still working on those?
That's a great question. So what I would have you do is then reach out to whoever's listed as the TPOC. I've been getting a lot of those questions as well. And so you'll probably notice that my name is the one that sent the email requesting updated information prior to the last sprint. So you can respond and just ask for that, and we'll connect you to the right folks. In general, though, there might be a small handful, but I think that either most or all have been awarded at this time.
Okay, if I received an email shortly after responding to the RFI Google form stating that my application was denied, does that mean that there is no interest in working with our technology platform? I was confused how my RFI was perceived as an application. That's very good.
So that's a great question. And that didn't come from like us at the kind of corporate level managing the form. There might have been one of those OPT members that reached out directly. And what we can do is message to the OPT team, because again, a lot of these folks are coming together very quickly. We can message not to use the application terminology, but I would just interpret holistically the email, right? So whether they call it an application or a request for information, if they said they weren't interested at this time, it probably means that they don't have an immediate need for the solution. And of course, you can reply to whoever sent that message and just seek clarification as well.
Absolutely. Can majority VC-owned companies work with us? Do you use the authority provided in 5107 of the SBIR STTR Reauthorization Act?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, I'm pretty certain the authority that you're asking about is, are there ways that we can have more than 50% owned by a venture firm, hedge fund, or other organization that's like that? There is a waiver in the statute that says, if you're going to do this, if you're going to invoke this exception or this waiver, there needs to be X, Y, and Z boxes checked. And a lot of it has to do with reporting from the specific service. So a lot of details. Long story short is we intend to try to do that in 20.2. That does not take effect for 20.R. So the one that we've been talking about for the direct to phase 2. That said, there are some exceptions to that where if the organization that has an investment in your company is a US owned entity that is also a small business, then it is not considered for that percentage amount. So I know that's really complicated. It is to us too, but an example would be is if you had a small business that met those criteria, who made an investment in your firm that tipped you over that 50% line, then that US small business would not count towards that equity amount, and you might still be eligible. So it's kind of in the weeds. It sounds like you already have an understanding of the statute and the policy. So kind of read into the nuance of what I just said there with that detail about small businesses being an exception. The overall exemption from that 50% rule, though, we will not try to invoke that until 20.2.
Okay, for the customer memorandum requirement for direct to phase 2, can the customer be from another department like DHS, Army, or DHS or DOD, Army, Coast Guard, etc.?
Yeah, really good question. Not yes to the answer, but that's a very good question. We talked about this a little bit before in that we're going to try to give you guys an update on the Thursday call and what is our take on that. Historically, we have required at least one Air Force customer to sign the memorandum, and then you could have as many other customers from other agencies and services as you wanted. So what we're trying to determine is this time, could you potentially just have a memorandum from NHS or from the Army or from some other organization and not have an Air Force memorandum? I think the answer is no, as of now. So that's my answer is no, you can't do that. But Thursday, we're going to go back and we're going to try to get some clarification.
Okay. Are you able to support discussion around multiple solutions for the RFI, or must they be submitted one at a time? We talked about that a little bit. Best to submit each separately so we can look at them each individually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this one's got 3 questions, so I will ask you each one separately, not all together.
Okay.
So for direct to phase 2, if we have multiple different solutions in response to COVID-19 topic areas for direct to phase 2, can we submit multiple submissions for D2P2?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the answer is, can you? The answer is yes. You have to acknowledge that you have multiple. In general, though, I think a good approach that we have seen is if you have a solution that is only very slightly different for different customers, for example, that you can just submit it as one, just acknowledging that if it's with this customer, it'll look a little tiny bit different. If it's with a different Air Force customer, it'll look a little bit, tiny bit different. That has worked. And in general, I would prefer not to see 5 proposals that are 99.9% the same with small differences. That said, if you have significantly different solutions, then there is no issue with applying multiple proposals to a single solicitation, as long as you identify that you have done so. John, can you pile onto that? Anything else on that?
Yep, the contracting answer is yes. If you have a different solution, you need to just annotate that accordingly. It could be very similar to a solution, another solution that you've proposed, but if they are different, I would probably recommend highlighting those differences. And you're going to have to then discuss in your certifications whether you've received an award for that before. So again, there's mechanisms that are built in there for you to identify cases where you've either had or could potentially have an award or multiple awards for the term is essentially equivalent work. So, I would say just pay attention to what the rules are on that and the certifications are on that. And those will be looked at by a contracting team when the proposal, if and when the proposal is selected.
Cool.
Okay. Is matching allowed for this specific topic? And if so, is there a cap to the amount that can be matched?
Yeah, that's a good question. So on matching, that is one of the things that I think has changed the most significantly from previous rounds. So I don't want to necessarily give advice on how to do matching now. I will just say that, yes, we can accept non-SBIR government dollars that we can put on top of the contract, so we can help to execute other people's money on the same phase 2 if you're awarded. Yes, we do observe private matching. So if you are receiving funding from a private entity that is towards a similar or analogous effort, then we will consider that when you're proposing. That said, the ratios of like the 2-to-1, the 4-to-1, or the 1-to-1, those are gone. And the ceiling for everybody is 1 million. So regardless of whether or not you have matching. That said, you'll notice in the evaluation criteria that things like matching are considered when we're assessing your commercial potential. So having the existence of matching can give you a higher ceiling on your contracts in terms of those government dollars piling on top of ours, but it does not affect the amount of SBIR funding that's going towards it. And then again, it also is a consideration during the peer reviews, so the evaluations.
And is there any issue applying and winning this CSO if we have been tentatively awarded a Directive Phase 2 19.3, which still has yet to be officially awarded?
Yep, there's no issues with applying to the 20.R Directive Phase 2 if you're pending an award for either what you described was the 19.3-DCSO1, the pending Directive Phase 2, or the 19.2 Phase 2, or the 19.3 Phase 2. So it's okay to have pending awards and still apply. As long, again, we keep foot stomping this, but if it is for a different solution, great. If it's for the same solution, you have to identify that and realize you cannot win both. So I don't, if you've already been selected for one, I guess off the top of my head, it wouldn't make sense to apply for another one for the exact same solution because you couldn't win both.
Correct. You must identify that when you submit under the 20.R. If it is the same solution or an essentially equivalent work solution, you must identify those previous solicitations that you've either been either submitted and are in review under, or have been submitted and selected, or possibly awarded under. You must identify those.
Cool.
Okay, when do you expect announcement of any requirements around COVID response capabilities that are needed by the Air Force?
I mean, I would look at the focus areas as the first indication of trends that we're seeing in those things that we need. We're going to update those over time. And also, again, I mentioned that there's on the horizon, there are other vehicles and opportunities that are coming down the pipe. Can't talk about them now, but there will be funding tied to them with specific rules. So keep checking back. Thursday is the next chance for us to give more information on that.
Okay. There is an open call on the Vulcan platform for Agile U.S. Air Force organizations engaging innovation from small business partners. Are you all working with them? I can take that, Steve. Actually, yes, we are plugged in directly with the folks at Vulcan, and we are reviewing those submissions right alongside the submissions that come in through the RFI.
Awesome.
Is there a targeted TRL for these opportunities? What is the desired timeline for the solutions that will be funded?
So for the RFI, again, completely open, no. And then for SBIR, there's no limitation. You can Control F TRL in the solicitation document, you won't find it. So we don't require that by any means. I would reference the Section 6 evaluation criteria for the types of things that we're looking at.
Okay. Steve, can you go back to the slide that has the COVID@afworks.af.mil email? This question is, how can I submit further information on my business, commercial lodging across the U.S., to be considered further? So if that is for the RFI, you can submit additional information at this email address that's on your screen right now, covid@afworks.af.mil.
And I'd also like to say, if you already submitted your RFI, you got that auto response that gave you your RFI number, please don't send a new email. I would just reply all to that. Make sure COVID is in the to line, and then just add on whatever you wanted to add there, because that's going to be the single easiest way to make sure that information is consolidated for that team.
Absolutely. Can you get an MOU for Directive Phase 2 that does not have matching funding?
Yes, you can.
Mm-hmm. At what phase in the process will contact or partnerships are available to small business participants to DoD research and/or operational test and evaluation organizations? I'm not sure of the question.
Yeah, I would just say in general that we are not limiting ourselves on either the type of ideas or solutions for the RFI, nor the potential customers or participants in that solution on the Air Force and government side. So test and evaluation will be involved with some. FDA will be involved with some. and just down the line, authority to operate on our software system will be involved with some, and we will make that assessment. Again, this RFI is just, request for information and feedback at this point. If it does get to the point that we'd like to have some kind of contract award that occurs between you and the government, those details would need to be negotiated then.
And how do I acquire a cage code to use with the Dunce?
So that's a great question. The instructions for how to get whatever certifications you need for SBIR are in the solicitation itself. So I'll just read through that for the specifics. I don't have the link off the top of my head.
And for the RFI, this company, they work for a tribally owned company that has approximately 30 separate sister companies with various capabilities. Should they submit each of them individually to the RFI?
No, I can't necessarily tell you the answer on that one, but I will say if they have varying capabilities, especially because we force brevity in your RFI submissions, so one sentence and one paragraph, 3 keywords, there's not a lot of room to describe 30 different solutions. So I would say make a gut call on that, and then it might make sense to have multiple submissions.
Okay. And we've already answered this one too. Do you need matching funds and an Air Force sponsor? Can you have another service sponsor for the MOU? You said you will address that again on Thursday's call.
That's right.
Okay. Probably worth mentioning that CAGE is Commercial and Government Entity Program. Yes, all of our acronyms, and can be obtained through getting your DUNS number. Is there interest in funding deeper genomic testing for phase 1?
For phase 1, so I'm curious what they're asking about there, because the 2 things we're talking about today are the RFI and the direct to phase 2.
Yeah.
If the question is for SBIR phase 1, 20.2, which releases later, I would just say in general, read through the solicitation. We mention a list of focus areas there, and at the time that the solicitation goes live, it will reference that list. If it's specifically called out on the list, great, we're interested in it. If it's not called out on the list, that's okay, because it's open, and we are open to being pleasantly surprised by solutions, sometimes that we didn't even know we need.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned matching ratios before. Can you state again what the new process is for matching?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the ratios are gone, and the ceiling for everybody with or without matching on the direct phase 2 SBIR is $1 million. That said, read through the section 6 in the solicitation, which is the evaluation criteria. You'll notice that one of the things we look at is commercial potential, which is, among other things, evidenced by the existence of matching funding. So it's just one of the things that we consider, but it does not change your SBIR ceiling, the amount that we can provide of SBIR funding.
For the RFI, are customers only DoD, or is it also state and local leaders?
So it's not only DoD. There are other agencies involved, but in terms of state and local, I don't know how much we've permeated to those different groups at this time. Anybody else have any insight into that on the call?
The RFI itself is open to all, so we do list it out as state and locals as well. Just so you know, though, when you do apply for the RFI, it is the DoD planning teams that are reviewing that submission. So it's not necessarily being funneled to your state and local leaders. It is being reviewed by the DoD planning teams.
Awesome, thanks.
And are all of the different pieces of the COVID response by DoD consolidated anywhere? That is definitely a work in progress. We are definitely bringing in multiple people at one time to look at all of the different requirements across DoD through the joint task force.
Mm-hmm.
So I do know that. Did you intend to mean that the SBIR is just a piece, or is AFWERX just a piece of the total fund?
Yeah, so both, right? So SBIR has its own funding associated. You've also got the whole Defense Production or Procurement Act, Title III funding, which is coming down. And so, yeah, we are a piece of an overall strategy. And then the SBIR is just a piece of that strategy that we're implementing too.
Right. And the third part of that is, I thought you opened with a statement about representing all of DoD, SecDef, or something like that. So the statement in the opening was to say that, yes, we are working across the board with the joint task force. And from the acquisition perspective, we, with AFVentures, AFWERX, the Air Force, is working with the Secretary of Defense's office to ensure that we can get after rapid contracting when the funding does become available. So it is definitely a team effort. This particular team that is speaking to you today is coming from the Air Force perspective. Will an Air Force customer MOU help with the directive phase 2? We have one we think we can modify for COVID-19 with our Air Force customer.
Yeah, so the customer memorandum is required for directive phase 2. So absolutely.
Okay. Under the RFI for logistics, would that also include HVAC and air filtering systems in the hospital and treatment facilities?
So we can look at the list again. I'll pull that up. But in general, keep in mind there's logistics, but there's also a focus area of medical, right? So that might be something that is relevant to that. There's also, within that, you've got medical supply chain, air and surface cleansing. So, I mean, that's actually a really good point. So one of the sub-focus areas under medical is air and surface cleansing. So again, if you go to either BetaSAM or the SBIR portal, where we have that SBIR solicitation, you'll see a list of more detailed focus areas. And on that list, there's some sub-bullets that might be relevant. And also, Tina, do you think it might make sense for us to list a more detailed focus area sheet on the AFWERX website as well? Or had you considered that?
Yeah, I think the more questions that we're getting from people, it's really helping us to craft the information that is required to help folks get through it simply and easily. So yes.
Okay, we'll post that there as well.
Okay. Is it allowed to partner with a foreign entity? And if yes, to what capacity, or in other words, what are the limitations? Now, it does not say if that is for RFI or for directive phase 2.
So for RFI, the answer is there are no limitations on that. And so, yes, you may provide information about how you intend to partner with foreign entities. On SBIR, it's not as cut and dry of an answer. So it does have to be U.S. owned and controlled. But in terms of, do you have foreign entities or foreign employees that are participating in the execution of phase 2, it's kind of a nuanced, it depends. So read through the instructions, it will address, or the solicitation rather, it will address that. And that's kind of the best answer I can give, because it's not a black and white type of thing.
Mm-hmm. And can we comment on how the Air Force effort is linked with the other efforts, Army, DLA, FEMA, etc.? It's challenging to track who is the first person depending on the situation. So what is the scope and area of your work?
So I don't have a super informed answer on that, or things that I can really, so I might tag on the rest of the team to be able to speak to that. The one thing I will say again is that there's no issue going through multiple routes and applying to multiple, as long as you're revealing that you're doing so. And so if maybe the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and NHS and whoever else cares about a certain thing, if you apply to all of them, just tell us. And then let's say you're selected for all of them, you just got to pick one. And so anyway, don't limit yourself by working with us. Just know that we are joint in nature. We do care about all the other players. The extent to which it is joint, I don't know, Tina, do you have any more insight into that?
Yes, so I will tell you, we are working across the services. Everyone is trying to stand up everything as quickly as we can to get after this. So there's definitely a concerted effort to share information. I know we met with Army Applications Lab yesterday, and all of our planning teams on the Air Force side, they are also coordinating through the Joint Task Force as well. They are in coordination with Department of Health and Human Services, with FEMA, to figure out what are requirements that are needed for them right now, and how can we utilize the solutions that are coming in through this RFI to answer those. So there's definitely a concerted effort, joint and whole of government. Is it perfect? No, but it is definitely being worked diligently every minute of every day.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, we still got a couple of questions left. Steve, how long did you want to go on this one?
We've got 36 minutes. I promised 2 hours. I'll give the full time.
All right. All right, so for an RFI, we completed a COVID design challenge with Johns Hopkins University and have a short video pitch like we submitted with AFWERX SBIRs. Can we submit the YouTube link on the form?
Absolutely. So, if you have a website URL and you have a video URL, post your website to the on the forum, and then just like you would for any attachments, when you reply all to that RFI number email that you get, just say, hey, by the way, we also have this video URL. But if you only have the URL for the video, just put that directly in the form.
Okay, for SBIR Directive Phase 2, can U.S. Air Force provide test patients and facilities? Are FDA approvals waived or necessary? And if needed, will Air Force help fund acquisition of FDA approvals to help speed up the process or assist in getting approvals needed?
Yeah, that's a really good point, a really good question. It actually goes beyond just SBIR, right? So that first question of like, will we provide any government furnished property? The answer is maybe, right? That's not something that's actually a call made at the Air Force Ventures level. When you are negotiating one of these customer memorandums with whoever your end customer is, that's a conversation you would have with them, right? So that's the first part. We would include certain clauses in the contract if we became aware of that, but that's a conversation you have with them. Regarding FDA approvals, I know that there's conversations, not just in the Air Force and across the government, about how do we accelerate the approval of things that are relevant to COVID-19. So again, not an Air Force thing, but that is a conversation that is being had. So we can't provide the answer on that one. And then the last one is, will we provide funding for that? Again, that's something that you can discuss with your customer who's providing the customer memorandum. And when you're building out your proposal, I would say philosophically, yes, there's no reason that we could not do that. It just would need to be articulated in your proposal and okay with your Air Force customer in terms of the work you're doing together.
Steve, this is John. I just wanted to make everybody aware. So when you have cases like that, where you would be involving actual testing using humans, which we would call human use testing, that is a very big wrinkle. I'll use that term. Right now, the way it stands, there's the HRPO IRB process has to be followed, to a T. And we have seen that substantially can delay the time that it takes to get a proposal onto award. But Steve, you're exactly right that's a process that's outside of the Air Force lane. We have no control over it. We cannot influence it. We cannot waive it. We also cannot award any R&D proposal that has those type of requirements until the approvals are in place. So that's just something that everybody, you may want to consider as it relates to that type of proposal.
So, hey, John, question on that. You know how for the small UAS example, we say that, they can still be awarded, but they can't actually, use small drones for operational purposes until those approvals are through. So they can receive the overall award, but if there's any deliverables, they cannot occur until they've received that approval. Is it the same thing then for any human animal testing or recombinant DNA testing?
The simple answer is yes. So theoretically, if you had a proposal where a part of the work, a part of the requirements you were proposing would be considered the human use testing, and there was another part of the proposal that was not human use, you could theoretically receive the award and funds for the non-human use testing, with the human use testing being done by way of an option or potentially a totally separate agreement, something like that.
Got it.
So that is possible.
Perfect. Yep, that's really helpful. Thank you.
All right, if we are an academic institution, are we eligible for SBIR, or is there an STTR category we could pursue?
So we don't have an open STTR at the moment. 20.2 is that next one that's going to open. And like I said, it's going to close along with SBIR 20.2. And it's called 20.B for STTR, sorry. It will close in early July. As to whether or not universities can apply for SBIR, John,
the answer is no.
Okay.
A university won't meet the definition, and many nonprofits also do not meet the definition of an SBC as defined by the policy directive. And I believe Steve, in one of the slides you provided the link.
Yep.
So just pay careful attention to that. But the top level answer is no. As a university, you will not be eligible as a prime small business company.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. The instructions for the 15-slide PowerPoint has a slide for phase 1 performance, slide 14. Should we just leave that out?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we can, we actually should take a look at updating that because I think we pulled that from the phase 2s coming off of phase 1. So the answer for now is yes, right? One of the things we still ask you to do with a direct to phase 2 is articulate, this is essentially what it's assuming is that you did the work you would have done in phase 1 on your own outside of the construct of SBIR, right? And so you can still capture, like, I found my customer, we received this memorandum or this customer memorandum, and this is the work that was contemplated on our own, which is what would have taken place in phase 1. But I tell you what, we're going to take a look at those presentations and make sure that those aren't misleading like it was in this case.
Okay. If RFIs, sorry, actually, that's a different question. Do I have the correct understanding that AFWERX via the email covid@afwerx.af.mil CBR.20.4 will help to match our solution to an Air Force customer that has a need and will sign the MOU?
So one clarification, it's 20.R as in 20.Romeo. So good question. It's on the screen right now, actually. But so yes, you are correct in the assumption that if you send an email there with that subject line, it's going to go to our team that is going through and trying to match solutions to customers. Now realize we're making no promises on timelines, promises that by emailing that you will find a customer. That make no mistake, that is still on you to be able to secure the customer memorandum. So two things. One is definitely do send an email there. But two, also continue to secure or search for the memorandum via other means as well if you want to have the best likelihood of actually finding one. So it is one avenue that is not making promises to you because, again, who knows, we could get 100,000 RFI responses that bog down the team to a point at which they can't be as effective. So they will do their best, but also continue to search for the memorandum via other means.
So this question, and I think with the answer to this question, Steve, you may just want to explain what happens when someone does apply or sends an email to that looking for an MOU signature, because it says if RFIs are forwarded to interested parties within the Air Force and U.S. government agencies, will you be encouraging them to contact us directly if they are indeed interested in signing our MOU, since time is compressed?
Yeah, so the OPT, the operational planning team, has a number of members, and they have a number of subgroups under that are helping to route to the right place. They have their own kind of rules of engagement for how they're executing. So we haven't said yes or no either way. They will. My guess is that once they've routed you to a customer, they will try to make that engagement as early as possible and then be able to track that for our purposes only. But there's no reason that they would try to force you not to talk to your customer, because that wouldn't quite make sense. So I think they will make the introduction. And if you get a response back that says, hey, we might be interested in your solution, then there's no issue with you asking, like, hey, can I talk to the actual customer? And if they say no, they'll give you a reason. If they say yes, then great. It was an opportunity that you took advantage of.
If we have a rapid diagnostic capability that works for other infectious diseases, but still requires testing for FDA approval for COVID-19, would AFWERX help us connect with FDA for permission if we are selected?
So I would, again, put that through the RFI. And it's more of a request for information, right? So the knowledge that you would need FDA approval is very helpful. And that is something that would just happen directly with you in a conversation of whether or not that was something the Air Force was willing to do from a connection standpoint. I can't promise that connection would be made. I can't promise there would be any streamlining as a result of it, but it is within the realm of the possible. So definitely still go through the RFI.
And does cybersecurity, remote vulnerabilities, better fit into communications and networks or information technology?
That is a great question. I don't know if I can answer that right now. Here, if you go on to the next one, I can take a look and give my assessment on that.
All right. Just to clarify, can a company apply to the current 20.R CSO for multiple distinct efforts and receive multiple distinct awards?
So the answer for that is yes. And what I would do, again, is reference in the solicitation. Unless there's a limitation that says you cannot, then you can. And so I don't believe that one is in there. The source document is the solicitation. Go check that out. And I think, off the top of my head, I think that the answer to that is yes.
For the RFI, which focus area would be best fit for supporting the defense industrial base?
Stand by. I'm going to pull up the list. So there's the 6 that we list, right? Combating the spread. So I don't think that, there's one that is number 5, industrial base impacts. So I think that's a pretty clear one on the RFI. But just realize that if there's an overlap, you got the Venn diagram and there's an overlap between 2, you just have to make a gut call on which one you're most applicable to. And so just do your best. But realize there is one that is literally called industrial base impacts.
Okay. And for the company that needed access to 3D printers Seismans is offering free access to additive manufacturing networks and can connect them with 3D printers around the world. So Glenn Rosen, since you put that in there, please submit that in an RFI so we can then connect others that might need that as well. Okay. You mentioned $1 million max, or that is automatic dismissal. Shoot, it keeps jumping around, sorry. Automatic dismissal of proposal on direct to SBIR 2. Is the 1 million including AFWERX matching? I think there's confusion here. Is the 1 million including AFWERX matching like the upward of 1.5, or is the total RFP only 1 mil?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and I'm glad you clarified this. That is the $1 million is the max amount of SBIR funds that you can propose, right? So if you have a government customer that is going to be sending us non-SBIR funding that is matching, that can increase above 1 million. So in theory, they could send you $10 million of non-SBIR funding, and then your total award could be $11 million because the max we can provide is 1 million. So that's a good question.
Do you need a GSA registration? I heard it could be a difficult process.
So you do not need a GSA registration. And if you're for both RFI and for the SBIR direct to phase 2, RFI is not a proposal, so you can just provide information even if you're unaffiliated and you just have an idea. For SBIR, the instructions of what you need are in that solicitation itself. So SAMI, Cage, Dunce, those types of things are required, but registering for GSA is not one of them.
Okay. Please send me information about the Advanced Manufacturing Partners Call. Okay, we will look that up and we will get that out to you all. Our company provides telepresence solutions as a horizontal technology. It allows remote users to collaborate with technicians and medical personnel. In targeting our response, are there any current or future priorities for focus areas we should be aware of?
So not at this time. What I would say is that just keep checking back. We're going to post the most current list of focus areas on the afworks.af.mil/coronavirus website. And we'll just keep that up to date. So I can't project out future focus areas for now. Just keep checking back.
Okay. Sorry, clicking over here. Okay, are RFI customers only government entities or also private companies?
Oh, so the customers are the government entities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of connections, we got to think about internally how we can make a connection if it makes sense. Because again, this is information that we're not intending to release because it's your private information you sent to us. But in general, yeah, the government is the customer. We're not trying to connect you to primes or other companies.
If our technology, which we proposed and was awarded under a joint 20.1, was for supporting either BOMC or ICU training, however, the technology is also being used for COVID-19 with civilian hospitals. If the technology is the same, but the use is different, does it make it something that is essentially the same, just seeking clarity?
Yeah, so that's one of those things where it's not a black and white if-then type of statement. Again, the definition for essentially equivalent work is both in the solicitation, and I would just search that verbatim in a search engine, right, to try to get more clarity on that. What I can say is if you have the exact same solution and you just, let's say it's an N95 mask, and you said, I have one N95 mask that's being worn by this person who is out grocery shopping, and I have this one that's being worn in a hospital, that is not, that's essentially equivalent work, right? But if the solution itself is different in some fundamental way to meet the needs of that other customer, and there's additional research and development required to get from where it is now to meet the needs of that customer, well, then an argument may be able to be made that it is not essentially equivalent work. So again, it's nuanced, it's in the gray, and also it's on you. So make an assessment of whether or not you are committing fraud and trying to be paid twice for the same thing. Do your research and then just do the best that you can on that.
Okay. We have submitted to a 19.3 phase 2, but we have not heard back yet. We intend to resubmit to the new D2P2. How should we let the team know a similar proposal is already submitted?
That's fine. There's a section in the direct to phase 2 where you're actually discussing other proposals that you've either been selected for or you've applied for but have not yet been awarded. And then there's another section that says, hey, have you received any awards to other solicitations or proposals?
As the team reviews RFI submissions, will you facilitate teaming between organizations if you believe 2 or more companies could bring a more valued solution?
Again, that's one of those things where I think philosophically the answer should be yes. And we'll have to work with our team on how best to do that in a way that doesn't cause us to start spamming companies with connections to other companies and doesn't reveal any information about what they're doing. So more to come on that. Maybe we can address that on Thursday.
Hey, Steve and everybody. Sorry to jump in. This is John. Listen, I have to jump off for another call, but I did want to emphasize a couple things really quick, just in regards to the 20.R D2P2 solicitation that is out there. I know you provided the link to the DSIP portal, which is fantastic. Just a note on the DSIP portal. While it is open, it will not be open for submissions until the 8th of April. So you can get there, but you won't be able to actually submit until the 8th of April, which I don't think is problematic anyways, considering it literally just opened yesterday. I'm sure people don't have their proposals all ready to go. So just wanted to highlight that. Another thing in regards to that solicitation is please do not send your IHL pages or any discussion on what your capabilities are to the contracting individuals that are identified in the solicitation. They're not going to be able to do anything for you. And while we love reading the ideas and seeing what's out there, we can't do anything with that. So all that information needs to go into the proposal itself. So that's just something that, I was asked to clarify for everybody. So I want to put that out there. If you have questions on the solicitation itself, the acquisition individuals' names are there. Feel free to reach out on that. If you have questions on the portal, the submission portal, any of that, all of those help desks and contact information are all in the solicitation as well. So just wanted to state that as I sign off here. And Steve, if there's anything else after that you want me to answer, just let me know.
Awesome. John, thanks so much for your time, man.
The other key thing for the DSIP portal is that sometimes that first page takes a little bit to load. If you're having any issues, you can reach out to the DSIP support team. Sorry for the delay and how long it takes to load.
Thanks, Joey.
All right, so just to confirm, if we submit a proposal under Directive Phase 2 X20.R, we are or are not able to also find matching and additional funds under $1 million with an Air Force end user.
So you are, and again, that's back where we talked about, like, if you were proposing $1 million of SBIR funds and you were receiving $10 million of non-SBIR government funding, you could just put that on top of it and then be awarded the $11 million. So the answer is yes, you can absolutely have non-SBIR government dollars placed on top of your Phase 2 award if you're selected and awarded for Phase 2 or for the Directive Phase 2.
And just to clarify for the RFI, by submitting an email with a focus area, not an RFI, sorry, for Directive Phase 2. By submitting an email with a focus area, are you all assisting and connecting us with a potential MOU partner within the Air Force or across various departments like FEMA, DHHS, etc.?
Yeah, and I think this might have been submitted before we answered it.
Yeah.
But the answer is yes. But again, no promises. We are going to do our best to make those connections. It's in our best interest and in yours, I think. But that doesn't mean to neglect trying to seek an MOU or a customer memorandum via other means as well.
Okay. Does the entire supply chain have to be U.S. sourced, or can the business be U.S. owned and product sourced overseas?
So it's a good question. So for the RFI, no limitations. For SBIR, again, this is a little bit nuanced. Look through the solicitation instructions itself. And then off the top of my head, I don't think there are any direct limitations about having, aspects of the supply chain that are overseas. It's on a case-by-case basis, I believe. But again, look into the instructions specifically as it relates to SBIR.
Can we apply under our current company and spin the effort into another company in the case of an award?
So that's interesting. There is something called a novation where you're changing the essentially the information of a certain award to a new legal entity. So that's one. If you became a new company, the novation is the way that you change that information in our records and all government records. In terms of spinning off technology, I think, so that's an interesting one. There might be a way in which you could cancel a contract or you could make a modification to the contract such that, you know, there's a subcontractor that's being pulled underneath something. I think that's just a nuance and it's a case-by-case thing. I mean, I think we would need more information on that, but I don't have a solid answer for you right now.
Okay. In regards to partnering with a foreign entity question, it was in regards to CBER. We are a U.S. small business concern and located in the U.S., but looking to partner with a company that is in France. The solicitation states phase 2 R&D work must be performed by the small business concern and its subcontractors in the U.S. This is a bit vague. Does it mean the subcontractor company has to be located in the U.S. or the overarching actual work must be done in the U.S.?
So yeah, that's a really good question. So the way that reads is that the work that is being accomplished for the contract is done in the US. So I guess I'll take an extreme example that can highlight the point would be, you know, if you have a part of your work is involving building a drone and you're using just let's say a Duracell battery and they happen to produce that somewhere overseas, that doesn't mean you're disqualified, right? So that's an extreme example to say, yes, if a component of what you were doing was created elsewhere, it doesn't disqualify you from participating. But if something that is actually the work that you're proposing, so in this example, if it was the creation of a particular drone is occurring overseas, then that is one of those things that would disqualify you. So again, a little bit gray. I think there's a little bit of an assessment that needs to be made there. And honestly, this is one of those things where if you look in the solicitation, you do have the contact information either for the contract officer or there's just a generic Air Force CBER help desk type of email box. This might be appropriate for that and maybe deeper conversation.
Okay, the Department of Energy was doing vouchers for testing in 2019. Are there any vouchers available with AFRL for COVID-19 tests on engineered products?
Not to my knowledge, but that's not to say there's not. I'm just not aware.
Yeah. And we have 2 more questions left.
All right.
I'm already on a phase 2, and our solution has been prototyped under the phase 2. It addresses a major COVID issue. Can we use direct to phase 2 to get manufacturing assistance to get us to medical providers?
So that's a great question. So one, definitely apply to the RFI. I would identify that you're on an active CBER phase 2 and just say which cycle you went through to get on it, because that's relevant information. In terms of whether or not you can use phase 2, for the open topic at least, I did mention that we are in the relatively near future putting out instructions to those active phase 2 companies on how to request additional CBER funding. So this might be one of the ways that you could execute against that. This is one of those things where do the RFI when they reach out to you and you're having that back and forth. If the Air Force is an interested party, you can bring that up and say, hey, maybe this is an angle that we can help to get after your needs. So it might help, but just still do the RFI.
Okay, if there is private matching, do the milestones have to demonstrate what tasks are being completed with private funds?
So the answer is no. You don't have to say milestone by milestone what is happening. And realize too that when you have private funds that are private matching, that is an agreement between you and that investor. We're not privy to that agreement. The only thing we have is in the fund matching document, which is something you submit with the proposal. It asks you in generalities, what is the work, the private money, the private investment being used for? So it's not line by line, but on the whole, what is it being used for? Beyond that, we don't need to break it down for each deliverable, what it's being used on.
All right, that concludes our questions.
Wow, Tina, thank you so much for reading these out. That was awesome. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop share for a second. Thank you everyone who stuck with us to the end. What are we up to? Still 168 folks are on the call. Thank you all so very much. We're going to take this recording and post it to afwerx.af.mil/coronavirus. Again, there's that yellow link at the top of the page to be able to get to that. And we will be doing this call again at 1 p.m. Eastern time this Thursday. Hopefully we have some new juicy news about other vehicles and things that we're using to help to get your solutions into the fight faster. Again, thanks to everyone who was on the call. From the AFWERX side, Air Force Ventures, from the PK side, CBER COE, thank you all so much. And then for all the attendees, we'll talk to you again on Thursday. Tina, anything else to close out?
Nope, just get your RFIs in so we can start connecting you all with the proper requirements. Thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thanks, team.